Welcome to the MPFT podcast. My name is Katie Dale and I'm the Assistant Director of Communications here at MPFT. Today I'm joined by MPFT's Chief Executive Neil Carr and Chief People Officer Alex Brett. Today is a special episode where we will talk about the High Potential Scheme, sometimes known as HPS. Built on the foundations of compassionate systems leadership, HPS is a unique and inclusive talent management programme which recruits diverse cohorts from across all health and social care sectors. Using a potential model, the programme is aimed at developing senior leaders who have the ambition to reach executive roles within 5 to 8 years of starting the scheme. The scheme immerses participants in experiential stretch placements, provides wraparound career coaching, executive mentoring and peer support through action learning sets. In addition, the programme delivers theoretical input via interactive workshops and invites very senior leaders to share their own leadership journeys and insights. I was fortunate enough to take part in pilot cohort 2 of the High Potential Scheme and graduated from the programme in January 2025. Today, with Neil and Alex, we're going to talk about the value which the High Potential Scheme brings to systems, organisations and participants like me and showcase the incredible success of the High Potential Scheme to date. The High Potential Scheme has been a massive success and now the programme's been rolled out nationally. As the Chief People Officer who was really invested in the pilot cohorts of the High Potential Scheme, can you explain some of the benefits that the High Potential Scheme has brought to systems and organisations and maybe talk about your perspective of CPO and what the scheme has brought?
Yeah, thanks Katie, and really good to talk about High Potential Scheme, or HPS as we fondly know it. So I think a couple of pilots that have taken place in our systems, Staffordshire Stoke-on-Trent and Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, working with partner organisations since 2018-19. So we're going back a bit now, and we've continued to run those pilots with huge success, as you've said. So I think there's some marked differences around HPS. It's a little bit different. So we're recruiting for talent. So it's not like other leadership development programmes that are out there. It's really about that experiential practice where we have stretch assignments, but also obviously there's some classroom based, but the vast majority is about those stretch assignments out in practice. So really immersive in terms of experience for folks, but that wraparound support as well is really critical to the programme. And what we've seen in terms of the numbers through our cohorts is around about 80% of Pilot 1, 70% of Pilot 2. Those individuals have gone on to senior roles, more senior roles, and quite a number of them have progressed into exec roles. So huge success in terms of the numbers that are graduating. We've now got 41 alumni across the Midlands region. And obviously fundamental to the programme is also about inclusive, compassionate leadership. So a real values-based programme around leading in the new world. So pleased to say we're here and pleased to say that we're rolling out now nationally, which is amazing for everybody that's been involved. A real effort for a number of years.
Thanks, Alex. And as I said in the intro, I was lucky enough to be a participant in cohort 2 of the HPS scheme and graduated in January 2025. And it really was an immersive experience, like you've said. And just to be really clear, this isn't a scheme where you sat in a classroom. You are put out and you are put to work. And I think for me personally, that was so valuable because you really got that stretch. You really saw your skills and your connections being stretched. And personally, it made me really think about where I wanted to go in my career and actually who is my support system. I think that was a lot of the benefit that I got. And I think the other thing that was really notable for me around how the HPS programme is different to others is the fact that when you're on a stretch, your role isn't backfilled. So you've got that, you've got to manage your time and understand and have that conversation, that courageous conversation with your line manager who, supports you to get on the programme, to understand how you're going to do that development piece, but also how are you going to kind of stay base safe in your, your day job. And for me personally, I was able to have a conversation with colleagues and provide them with some development opportunities, and they were taking care of that sort of on a daily basis while I was, one day a week going off and doing a stretch opportunity for a number of months. So I think it's really worthwhile being really clear about that it is really different and you actually are getting a real taste for it. And I think that's sort of so valuable, and everybody who I've spoken to really got something out of it. So Neil, another thing that I got from my HPS experience, which I don't think that I would have got it from another programme necessarily, is an executive mentor. And I was lucky enough to be paired up with a deputy chief exec at a local acute trust, and I got one-to-one time with that individual, and it was really valuable. That person really made me think differently around some of the scenarios that I found myself in. As a chief executive, how do you think access to those sorts of opportunities and connections helps people, particularly on programmes like this?
I think it's absolutely crucial. And as you say, Katie, many people really did value this particular experience of having an executive mentor stroke coach. And I think one of the things we have to accept, we all need someone to go to who will listen to us, who will give us their opinion, who will perhaps see it from a different angle. I think that's absolutely essential. That's how we all grow. So I think this is an essential component of the scheme. My advice would be to harness the opportunities, really drive forward with your mentor, develop that very transparent relationship where you can discuss the various options, opportunities, and make it work for you. Make that relationship dynamic. And it's something that also I think mentors can give something back into the system, because we've all been in that position of being a mentee. So I think to be a mentor, it is an opportunity to give back.
And as two very senior leaders who sit in front of me today, who've grown and developed their careers in the NHS, what's your take on people who are, nurturing the future? Is it something how is that sort of positively impacting our system, our organisations? What's the value in really looking after the talent that we've got within our organisations locally and then within the system? How does that benefit organisations?
Well, Alex will have her own view, but my sense is, we should all be involved in spotting talent at an early opportunity, the earliest opportunity, and we should be nurturing that talent. We should be liberating that talent, and that's what the high potential scheme does. So for me, it's about someone feeling they've got a real voice, a voice that is being heard, they've got a direction, they've got a clear vision, and we're facilitating that as an organisation. We're helping them on their journey, because they're often people who know where they want to get to. They just need some support on the way.
And just to add a few points, couldn't agree more in terms of what Neil's just talked about. And I think it's critical for our future as well, both developing talent but retaining talent.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that's different about the high potential scheme, because it's a system effort. So actually it's about system partners coming together regardless of organisation, collaborating collectively to support and develop talent in the system. And I think that's a critical difference here. And there's something about, in I guess the new world, in leadership terms, we're expecting different things of our leaders, aren't we? Working across boundaries, thinking about coming together around common issues and problems. And I think what the HPS scheme does that's a bit different, it breaks down those barriers. So you are working together. And this is absolutely about retaining talent, not just in the NHS, but also in your local systems.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And an observation that I made when I was sort of entered my cohort we were put into action learning sets, and there was six people in my action learning set. You know, we sat in the first session of that action learning set, and we all had to be very vulnerable, and it was a group of people that I'd never met before, and we were from different organisations, you know, some NHS, some local authority, some clinical, some not, some with lots of experience of other leadership programmes, some just entering this sort of leadership development process. And actually the relationship that we've built within that ALS has just flourished. And if I've got a question for an ICB colleague, I've got a really good connection there that, you know, do you know such and such? I could ask about such and such. And I think for me, that connection and the networking has been really invaluable, but also understanding some of the challenges that are happening in different parts of the system, and not just seeing it through the lens of the organisation that you work for.
Yeah. Katie, for me, you've summed it up. The whole notion of where we're going to is around partnering. It's around partnerships. So I think in a supportive way, it's important that we take people out of their comfort zone. We grow that confidence in themselves. They're able to formulate their own opinions and views. They're not afraid to challenge, but they know how to challenge constructively.
Thank you, Neil. So we've talked a lot about the first two cohorts, which have been in Staffordshire Stoke-on-Trent, and then the second cohort was extended over to Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin. Yeah. And Alex, from your perspective as the Chief People Officer, what have been the key outputs so far? You know, if you look at the business side of it, what have the key outputs been, and what have the benefits been for us and other system partners?
Well, I think you've got a cadre of leaders that are developed in a different way. So, you know, in terms of, I think the outcomes speak for themselves in terms of both retaining talent, but the numbers that have graduated. But equally, as you've said, Katie, across multiple different areas. So growing talent, not just in one certain area, but actually growing talent across organisations in different roles, in different specialties. And I think those results speak for themselves in terms of people going into senior roles. We know from the data that we have got a gap nationally, haven't we, around senior roles in the NHS becoming harder and harder to recruit into, but also to retain talent into. And I think what this scheme is about is growing for the future. So you're growing that talent for the future. And I think some of those outcomes through the stretch assignments that we've seen people undertake is not just that individual benefit, but actually the giving back and the benefit to the organisation. And when I talk to other system partners and senior leaders in the space around the benefit of HPS, it's a different programme in that actually it brings partners together in a different way. You've just talked about, I think, some of the benefits in your action learning set through the programme, and what we see as either exec sponsors, mentors, is that we can replicate that at senior level because, of course, we're all supporting the programme together. Yeah. So I think it's that added benefit of you've got to come together as a system to support this cohort, this cadre of leaders that are going through the programme. And for me, that's priceless in breaking down, you know, boundaries, working together on a collective effort. And, you know, it's really exciting stuff, isn't it? The developmental things are the things also that you can take back into organisations. That ethos then goes back into organisations, which for me is really powerful.
I agree. And I think my experience of the HPS is that throughout the golden thread was consistently that connectivity, that sort of the notion of you've been able to connect and involve and be part of a wider piece of work. And one of my reflections is that actually the stretch assignments not only benefited me personally, but actually the stretch placement was getting a slightly different skill set than they may have ordinarily got. Exactly. You know, I went into mine as a comms expert and was clearly seeing things much more differently than somebody who comes from an operational background. So I think it's really important to recognise that there's lots of different opportunities for growth, whether that's the participant, the service lead, you know, the chief executive and the board. So, like you say, I think powerful is a really important word. So, Neil, if you were sat with your chief executive colleagues up and down the country, and people are considering HPS or considering development opportunities for their future leaders. What would what would your thoughts be in terms of recommending the HPS as something that they could introduce into their system?
Sure. I think what I would be saying is the way we deliver healthcare today is not how we're going to deliver it tomorrow, 6 months, 5 years' time. So are we equipping people with the skills to think well outside of their box? It's about partnership into the future. Have we given people the exposure to really understand the partnering, the partnerships, where we put our energy? And I think that is very important. Have we liberated people to think in a different way? And I think that's absolutely crucial. So for me, it's that opportunity to grow people by them understanding the bigger picture and knowing what their role is within that. And I think that's something we've got to be thinking about. We've got to take people to a different place with a different set of skills so they can manage and lead into the future.
Brill, agree. Thank you. Is there anything that you'd add, Alex?
I totally agree with what Neil's just said, and I think that for me is the essence of HPS, isn't it? About why it's important to invest in it, but it is an investment. And I think it's an investment of time and it's an investment of commitment. So I think, it's seen this as a critical thing to do in amongst all the busyness and everything that we've all got going on and all of the priorities, is not losing sight of the fact that we need strong, compassionate leaders into the future that can work in the way that Neil's just described. So for me, the business case speaks for itself, but I think going into HPS, you've got to have that commitment. You've got to be in it for the long haul, and you've got to come together to support it as a system. And that's the sort of, dare I say, magic dust in it, in that that's the bit that makes it work. That's the bit that makes it really powerful, is that commitment and the coming together of senior leaders to support this new cadre of leaders into the future who will need to lead in a different way. Yeah. And this exposes them to some of that learning.
Yeah.
I've talked a little about partnering and partnership, but between the individual on the scheme and their organisation, it's an opportunity to identify the talent we want to nurture, but also to hold the mirror up and ask people to reflect on what they see at the moment and what is it within themselves that they'd like to change. It's a very dynamic process, but it can fast track people and it can inspire people. And that's what we're trying to do here, inspire people to be the leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think, I feel so privileged to have been part of the HPS scheme. I joined just after returning from maternity leave, feeling like I'd not really got an awful lot of direction, but, I've always been pretty ambitious, and it's taught me so much about not only myself, but also about pushing the boundaries, but doing that in a really compassionate and professional way. I think privileged is a word that I would use to explain it. And I think the other key component for me is the facilitation team that were part of cohorts 1 and 2, who were just absolutely brilliant and just completely live the values of HPS and really bring that to life. And Alex, their success has really sort of shone because they've now become the HPS hub, which is a sort of nationwide piece of work, and are now sort of branching out with spokes across the country. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think, I think to go from a place where we were a pilot for a number of years, but actually I think the interest is there. And as we've talked about today, the results speaking for themselves. But of course, it's taken the dedication and commitment of a small team who have continued to champion this, continued to, I think, showcase the good work and what HPS can achieve. And I think we're at a critical point now where actually, the aspiration is to roll that out now across England. In stages. So I think we've got the go-ahead for that first revised cohort out, and that will be with a number of systems, and we're hopeful we'll be able to evaluate that and then roll that out further in due course. But it's really exciting because, you know, what we've seen in just a small pocket of what we've done, the potential is huge to do that across the country and have every system in England. What a world that would be if we could replicate this everywhere. That's really exciting from a talent development perspective.
Thanks, Alex.
Can I just add, Katie, that the theories of leadership, I pour no cold water on. They're essential to understand. But this is about a journey of discovery of self, your values, your behaviours. What impact does it have on the workforce you're leading, on the organisation that you're representing? And for me, that's what's key to this. We can see how we can bring ourselves to it and change outcomes.
And I think that's really important, particularly as somebody who works in a corporate service. I think often you can feel like you don't see the impact that you've had. So for me, the HPS has genuinely given me the techniques and the tools and skills to really think about what's the output that I'm and what's the impact. So I think, you know, for anybody who's in my perspective, it's an absolutely fantastic opportunity. But likewise, really encourage leaders like yourself up and down the country to take on the opportunity and really help support and develop staff who are really passionate about the future of the NHS.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining today's podcast.
No,
Thank you.
A big thank you to Neil Carr and Alex Brett for joining today's podcast. For more information about the High Potential Scheme, please see the show notes.